Good morning, everyone on the call, and good morning to Dr. Farrell and Wendell. It's such a pleasure to have you here. And, I am more nervous now than I have ever been for any other event that I've had to host or speak at. And that's because for a very long time, I won't say how many years, but I've had a mild obsession with three canals. So I'm confessing now. But I mean, I am blown away to have both of you as guests here on this webinar this morning and to have this important discussion. Really, this came about as an idea in my head on Carnival Friday when I attended Three Canals concert. And I was moved to tears, honestly, because so much of what was said and sung spoke straight to my heart about all that is right and all that is wrong about Trinidad and Tobago and what we need to do to fix it. I describe Wendell Manwarren as a social transformation agent. I hope he didn't mind that I describe him that way. And I do believe that Three Canal and their message have the potential and the power to be truly agents for social transformation in Trinidad and Tobago and the transformation we truly need. Terrence, Farrell, as you all know on the call, goes without introduction and explanation that he is one of the foremost thinkers and economists in Trinidad and Tobago, if not the region. And having written The Underachieving Society first, like I said to Terrence, he redeemed himself by writing We Like It So, because that first book made me cry so much and took me so long to read. We Like It So really explores the cultural explanations as to why we are the way we are. And he explores subjects such as, and I'm just reading here from the introduction, ambivalence, status, respect and respectability, amusement and fetting, corruption and trickery, conflict avoidance and cooperation, and the list goes on. So I think both of them, both Terrence and Wendell, have very diverse but similar in many ways as well, views on what explains why we are the way we are, and more importantly, what is the solution. So I want to invite Terrence, please, if you can share with us your thoughts as you've outlined in your book as to why we are the way we are, and what are your thoughts on the causes?
Right.
Perfect. I was wondering where you guys were.
and there's Wendell.
Morning.
Morning. Just let me say, I wrote When We Like It So with a question mark, because I have been very deeply concerned about the fact that for a country that we talk about as being so rich in resources, in oil and natural gas, and rich in talent and rich in creativity, why is it that this country seems to have underperformed when I compare Trinidad and Tobago with other countries which are not as blessed as we are, not as endowed as we are with the natural resources, with the talent, with the creativity? And so you look at a country like Barbados, for example, which is a small island, has no natural resources, but yet it has managed to progress as well as Trinidad and Tobago over the last 50 years. You look at a country like Singapore, which at the time of our independence in 1962 had a per capita income that was lower than that of Trinidad and Tobago, now is counted or ranked among the developed countries with a per capita income that is about 2 or 3 times that of Trinidad and Tobago. And that question sort of haunted me as to what is the explanation for it, because the explanation couldn't be a lack of talent or resources or anything. And I kind of came to the culture factor as an explanation for it. And by culture, we're not talking about sort of cultural expressions. We're not talking about music and dance and calypso and so on. What we're talking about are really the values, attitudes, and behaviors of our society. And we're talking here more particularly about the values, attitudes, and behaviors of our leaders in the society. Because one of my tenets that I have in respect of this thesis is that it is the leadership in the society, in any society. I call them the elite in the book, and I make no apologies for that. Every society has an elite. American society has an elite, and that elite in American society will eventually deal with Mr. Trump. And Trinidad and Tobago society had an elite, which was the British colonial elite, the British governor and so on. And then when we transitioned to independence, we then have been trying to form our own elite. The importance of the elite in society, it is that the elite in society are the ones who hold and who transmit its values, attitudes, and behaviors. It is the elite that defines who we are. And by elite, I mean anybody in the society who has the ability to influence others. So Wendell is part of the elite. You may not think so.
For sure.
But yeah, Sparrow, Kitchener, David Rudder, you know, Ella Anders, right? Along with the Prime Minister, the President, and the Chief Justice, and our principals of our secondary schools and our senior police officers are all part of who I describe as the elite. Because it is what they do or what they do not do that influences the rest of us, determines how the rest of us behave and act, what we consider to be true and correct, what we consider to uphold, and what we consider to be bad in the society. And if our leadership, if our elite fail us, then we end up kind of like, I think, where we are. I mean, so point that the problem is that the elite in Trinidad and Tobago has failed us over the course of the last 50 years. And there are a number of reasons for that, but let me pause at this juncture.
Thanks, Terrence. And so, Wendell, you can tell us your thoughts on why we are the way we are.
Well, thank you. Terrence, is an absolute honor to be in your company and to be discussing. And Marla, thanks for the invitation.
Thanks for coming.
I devoured your book in the last couple of days. We like it so. And you know, when you're reading something and you're going, there was such an understanding of fundamental. You were just laying it out so clearly and almost clinically. And I had to remind myself, well, he's an economist, I'm an artist. So just, you know, we will couch things differently. But I'm glad I read your book after the fact of doing the show, because I would have been accused of copying. Because I think we're speaking to the same things. And just as you say, you start by asking a question. And we always begin by asking a question. We always begin by asking ourselves, you know, what time it is and what's going on around us. And we always begin from the assumption of being deeply rooted in the inquiry of who we are and what we may be. You know, in Hamlet, there's a quote where Ophelia says, "Lord, we know what we are, but not what we may be." And I became aware of that quote a long time ago. And it's always resonated with me. And the idea that knowing what we may be, I think, is imperative at this point. I think that's what your book is speaking to. How do we get out of this space that we're in, this space that was created for us, that we inherited, that we now inhabit, and continue to play certain roles, you know? And the assumption is, first, to be what we may be, we have to know what we are. And this is where we come up against the real challenge, because one of the issues you find in trying to investigate yourself in this space is you come up against an abominable ignorance, a lack of access to information, a lack of, and even if you do access the information, the perspective is not a perspective that includes you. I mean, one is spoken of, one is described in certain terms. And then speaking of the elite, I just happened to reread The Loss of El Dorado. And you understand from the beginning what was going on. These people who were entrusted with positions of power and authority, they just use that power to abuse and empower themselves and disempower others. And that has been our history, and it continues to play itself out. And we're not really dealing up with it. And that's just the history part. Because we can't live in history, we have to be informed by history. What about now? So I always tell them that's why we ask that question, what's going on now? And when you look around, all the things that you speak of, that you give terms to, that things that I trying to grapple with, you know, and I always look to other voices to help me understand what's going on. And in this instance, with the show this year, we turned to Earl Lovelace, and his book is just a movie.
It's just a movie.
And I was telling somebody the other day, well, I first read the book at Christmas time when it was released, and Trikanal mentioned it twice. I was like, oh God, fellas, we reach inside and novel. Inside and novel. That meant a lot to me. It meant that there's this voice that for me is a validating voice, a voice that helps us to understand the predicament we're in, the situation we're in, how we end up here, you know, putting us in his story. But the story itself is such an incredibly funny, moving, sad story. And by reading it this time around, I was able to see other things in it. You know, there's a quote in it, he says, in asking for power, we're actually expressing our powerlessness, in reference to the 1970s Black Power movement.
That's right, yes.
I was a little boy in 1970, a very little boy. I had cousins who was involved in that. I had cousins who get locked up. I see, you know, on the walls in Belmont, NUFF. I didn't know what that meant at the time. But trying to piece all these things together is where I am now. And as an artist, as somebody, a storyteller, somebody interested in us, I see that, and the group, you know, we see that as our work. And so when I see your story from your perspective, and it's saying, but it's the same story, and we asking the same question.
Indeed. You know, so the thing is, though, so many of us in the Caribbean have had similar histories, right? I mean, one of the most distinctive things about Trinidad and Tobago in a regional context is, of course, our natural resource endowment and our ethnic diversity, right? Which I think might be unparalleled in this region. But, you know, again, we've had so many countries in the Caribbean that have had similar histories with respect to colonization by various European countries. And, you know, we do have similar cultural, you know, aspects, but there is so much that is different about Trinidad. I am still not sure I understand why it is, besides, yes, there is a resource curse element, but why is it that we have not just a culture of impunity, but it's like we have a Tiefin ecosystem, you know, and we have this very deep ingrained rentier, not just rentier economy, but rentier ecosystem that's, you know, it's in our minds, it's in our hearts, it's in everything we do. And yes, there is a resource curse explanation for that, because we see that in other resource-rich countries. But in both of your perspectives, is there anything that explains what is different between us and the rest of the Caribbean that explains, you know, why we have the problems we have, for example, with violence and corruption and impunity, that perhaps other countries in the Caribbean, for example, I keep drawing the example of Grenada. Grenada has the highest youth unemployment rate in the region. Yet still, they don't have crime nearly the levels that we do. They have very little violent crime outside of domestic crimes of passion and domestic violence. And so they have very, very little crime, violent crime. And, you know, why is it that they have that scenario and we don't? What are the things that explain why we are different, apart from the resource endowment? Any of you have any ideas?
Well, I think it is not, I think not really quite true to say the other Caribbean countries are that different from us, you know, because Trinidad is perhaps an extreme case.
Well, exactly.
of the West Indian problem, but it is a West Indian problem. Barbados, simple, quiet Barbados, has had revolt. Grenada has had revolt and revolution. Yes. You go through all the Caribbean. You come to Haiti, you come to Jamaica. Jamaica, just the other day, we had the incident in West Kingston with Dulles Coke, and 70-something people were killed. We have had 1970, we've had 1990. Throughout the West Indies, that's been a problem. Trinidad is an extreme case of what is essentially the same phenomenon. And the question is, in terms of what explains the fact that we are so extreme, despite
Exactly.
that we have so much resources, which one would have thought would help to sort of mute things and dampen things down and so on. And the reason I think has to do with a couple of things. One is that, as I said, our elite here are deeply ambivalent. We are, instead of, our elite and our people, generally speaking, but I'm talking about our leaders, are very ambivalent about what they consider to be important, what they value. And they value different things. So that they value, for example, status. They value being in office. They value having authority. But they do not at the same time understand, in very many instances, the responsibility that goes along with that authority. So people occupy office, but they don't exercise authority. They exercise authority autocratically sometimes, but they don't understand the responsibility that goes with that. So there are some very clear examples that we see, and I see this "We Like It So" book is a book that I had to stop writing, because if I could just go on with
go on and on. You can go on and on.
So if you look, for example, at what has happened with the Sea Bridge, what is the problem with the Sea Bridge? Why have we reached a situation of complete breakdown and crisis? Well, people will say that it's lack of political will. They will say all of those things. But the problem, the root problem that we have here, is that the problem of the Sea Bridge breakdown started 10 years ago. It didn't start yesterday or last year.
Right.
It started 10 years ago. And it starts with a leadership of a port and a government that has to take a particular view on the service that is being provided, and take a view as to how the capital assets, that is to say the ferries, are going to be maintained, when they are going to be maintained, when they are going to be changed out, and so on. But we don't take those decisions. So what we do is that we do nothing. And when we do nothing, the crisis then begins to creep up on you. You get breakdown, and eventually you get collapse, which is what we have. And this is the situation that if you look at all of our institutions, the situation, for example, with the Judicial and Legal Service Commission and the Chief Justice is a parallel situation, where we have had an institution called a Service Commission, which was a colonial institution. The colonial authorities imposed the service commissions on us and told us, listen guys, we don't trust you to behave yourself as politicians with the public service, and therefore we are going to have a service commission in the Constitution to make you all behave and to protect the public servants. 50 years later, we have these service commissions, and it is bacchanal and confusion. Right? So you have this as I said, this ambivalence, this inability to recognize, to exercise what Lloyd Best used to call, he called us an unresponsible, unresponsible, not irresponsible, unresponsible, meaning that it is not that people were irresponsible, meaning that they were reckless and careless. It is that they were unresponsible, meaning that they were put in positions of power and authority, and they did not know or understand what responsibility required of them. And that's the problem that we've had.
That's the problem.
Nobody held them to account. Wendell, you share your thoughts.
Well, you know, when I hear the docs speak there, you talk about the history, about what's the difference between us and the rest of the region. There's a lot that we have in common, but there's also a lot that's very unique to Trinidad and Tobago, in that we are the youngest society in the whole mix. So whereas a lot of those other societies were well-established slave plantation societies and economies, and they had their revolts, in a sense, we now looking to have our revolts because we really didn't have it yet, you know. Because we inherited certain structures. No, that was a blip on the screen. It had no ideology. You see, we lack in ideology. We have impulses, but where's the ideology? Okay, we throw a coup, and then what? 3 days later, it's all over, right? And then talk about unresponsibility, you get paid for it. And you know, we don't commemorate that.
Only in Trinidad.
We investigate it, and then we shelve it. And it's a real pappy show. And I remember grappling with Lloyd Best many years ago. Say, I have to read Lloyd. I have to understand what this man's saying here. It's like, ooh, it took me a long while. But I remember reading the quote, the unresponsible elite. And the stress on the word un instead of irresponsible. And just those subtle play on words. And you see, I'm a rhapsody man, the power of the word in the room of the word. And everything you're describing there, all to me is just symptoms, is symptomatic of something deeper, some kind of psychosis. So it's not that we're not capable, it's not we don't have the possibility, it's the lack of will. You just use the word political will, and the lack of self-belief, the lack of, so many times you engage people in positions of authority and it's like they don't believe that they ought to inhabit that position. They can't get up and make a speech on whatever their subject area is. Even when somebody writing notes for them, they're sounding like Donald Trump giving a speech. They sound like they playing a mass, which is what you said to us.
Masquerade. Yes.
But you see, I'm a mass man, so for me, that's a demon in the mass. That is playing Dolly House.
That's true.
Sometimes when you was growing up, you used to play Dolly House. You play Mommy and Daddy, and they get older, they play Doctor and thing. But it's like these people inherit these positions, and when I say these people, I have to throw all of us in it.
Yes.
And we inherit the positions, but we're afraid to mash corns, we're afraid to set precedent, we're afraid to assess things on their own terms and make decisions. We still look for external validation constantly. We still bring in all kind of people to advise us how to run our music business. Our music business, our calypso recording business are 100 years old. Our oil industries are 100 years old. And we're doing studies, hiring people in London to tell us how to do what to do with our music.
Well, obviously, you listened yesterday to the Prime Minister and the Minister of Energy because that, I mean, after that discussion, you say you have had an energy industry for 100 years, and now because you have a problem with the multinationals, you have to bring people from outside to advise you.
Once again.
So this is a post-colonial insecurity that, I mean, we're not the only ones that are affected by that, but permit me to please read a quote that, Terrence, you had in your book from Earl Lovelace's The Dragon Can't Dance. And this speaks directly to that insecurity that I see that is pervasive all over, but I think it's especially acute here. How come everything we do, we have to be appealing to somebody else? Always somebody to tell us if this is right or wrong, if it's good or bad. Even with guns in we hand, even with power, we was looking to somebody else to make a decision. And that is, you know, even yesterday's announcement that you spoke about, Terrence. It's we are so indecisive and tentative about everything that we're not bold enough to do what I think is necessary and what I think many of us know is necessary for us to do to make a change. And that insecurity really is crippling us. And so I want to actually just shift the conversation a little bit now to solutions. What do we do about this? How do we fix this? And we write books and we sing songs and we have concerts, and that's great to lift the minds and raise awareness. But in terms of policy making, in terms of getting people to actually change the way they behave and to be responsible and not unresponsible or irresponsible, how do we make this change?
Well, you know, writing books and singing songs is a big part of it.
Of course it is.
We have to use the popular media. We have to use our media. We're not using our media. You know, we talk about how do you educate a people. You're going to school, what you learn in school, your dad don't stay in your brain. You know, you learn Martin Luther King and Malcolm X and all those things through TV, through movies. We don't know our story. We barely know our history, but worse yet, our story. That, you know, Joseph Campbell says that if you really want to impact someone, if you want to transform someone, tell them a story. You know, this sense of belief has to be couched in some sort of mythos, some sort of mythology, some sort of common, you know, belief. You know, what are we invested in? You know, what are we here for? Why are we here together, all of us in this scenario? So you need the poetics, you need the, you know, the metaphysics, you need all those things, but of course you need to put your shoulder to the wheel and put your 2 foot on the ground and do the work. And what I see time and time again is that lack of preparedness to actually do the work. But one of the things it starts from is, speaking of Earl again, and it's just a movie, he says, we have to be prepared to ask ourselves questions. Questions like, and in the middle of the list of questions, he said, what's life? What is the good life? What is democracy? And that just jumped out at me. It's like, hey, just so you put that in the middle there. But a lot of us haven't questioned anything. We haven't challenged anything. We just assumed this is how it is, and so shall it be. I met the Minister of Education not the senior, the junior, and he was talking about the same scenario with the service commissions, and I was like, so nobody can fix that? And he's like, no, nobody can. And so shall it ever be. And how could that be? How could that? And I think we're in a turn now, we're in a generation now that's what they're asking. They come to you like, so we like it, so no, we don't like it, so we want something else. We have a millennial generation now that is gone past us. You know, we're still grappling with old questions. They've gone past us. They have educated themselves via YouTube and the World Wide Web and whatnot, and they have bigger issues and they want to create apps for everything. But the problem is they don't know themselves on the ground here. So one of the first things I do when I engage them is, boss, listen to this, read this, let me talk about this. We need to bolster self. We need to validate self. We need to value self. We just stop talking the talk. You know what broke my heart the other day? You resigned from what I thought was the thing that would give us some sense of hope, the Economic Diversification Board, right? You resigned from that, and barely a blip on the screen, and then the Prime Minister there, they tell him about talking about diversification, and his advice to people was to hush them out and drink their rum. And you know, he even went so far as to say people had the temerity to presume that they would have a plan as to how to diversify the economy. And dare I say, yes, we would have such an expectation. If you present yourself for office, if you present yourself for power, you can't just be going in there just to have the power and then figure out what to do. It's just like when you throw a coup and you don't know what to do. So what are these things that we're dealing with? You know, the other day I get a picture of Christmas on my WhatsApp, because that's technology nowadays. Somebody sent me a picture of Christmas. Me asked for it. I see this picture of this young man is like, who's this? And then I see Christmas. Just this name alone. He's from Basilon Street. I grew up in Belmont. I used to go to Basilon Street. I had an uncle up there. You know, and whatever the circumstances were, it caused a big brouhaha. And you know what the comments were? How dare these people do what they do and inconvenience me from getting to work today and whatnot. So that social disconnect, that sense of us and them, and the many thems, you know, is like we just becoming more and more siloed. You speak about, you know, the VIP culture in your book, you know, the VVIP culture.
VVIP.
It's going crazy. We're creating some sort of monstrous psychoses in which we all inhabit in. And who's going to say the emperor has no clothes? I guess somebody else has to come and watch you and say, hey, what's going on?
Yeah. So, I mean, you know, Marla asks, well, what do we do about it? And you know, some people have criticized my book and said that the conclusions or the prescriptions at the end don't seem to be, they won't get us anywhere. But I still maintain that, and I go back to where Wendell started, that we have to re-educate the society's elite about our history. But it is not about doing history like how we do history in Form 1 and Form 2 and so on. Right. It is understanding, for example, this fella called, you read Loss of El Dorado, right, by Paul? This fella called Picton arrived here and just started a wage war in the place. he tortures Luisa Calderon. He links up with Begorat, the French planter, and the two of them buy up land and so on, and right? And if you want to think about our political figures, they are Pictons.
Pictons, yeah.
They are Pictons. Now, the second point I want to make about how do we change it, it is that my view is that culture is contextual, because I make the point that if you take a Trinidad and you take a West Indian and you put him in London, and you put him in New York, and you put him in Los Angeles and so on, he just functions differently. So it has nothing.
And we all endorse it. We all recognize it, and it's part of our storytelling.
Part of our, yes. So we it is not DNA. It is context. You take a Trinidadian, when he arrives back in Trinidad, he starts to behave right. Like in fact, within Trinidad, one of the things I point out is that there are certain places, like in the Point Lisas estate, which are operated and run by Trinidadians, where people follow the rules, they follow health and safety considerations and so on, and they do the things right, and they are productive and so on, and they drive out the gate and right, they become Trinidadians. So the context. So my view is that we have to change the context within which people operate. So our leaders, in whatever sphere you are, let me give you another example. Take the performance of our schools, okay? There are some schools that do very well and some schools that do poorly. What is the difference? They all get money from the Ministry of Education and so on and so forth. Right? What's the difference? The difference, I warrant you, is the principle. If you look at St. Joseph's Convent in Port of Spain, or you look at St. Augustine Girls High School, and the girls are doing better than the boys and so on, what is it different? You have a disciplined school with a disciplined principal, exercising authority appropriately, motivating their staff and so on, and the school performs.
You have leadership.
Leadership.
Right? And we have, right? And Wendell would know, and I would know, St. Mary's College across the road, right? Different. A different story.
Except for Father Jab.
For Jab. Different story. It is about leadership. You have to, if you can create a context as leaders within a particular spheres of activity where we take responsibility. We do not act unresponsibly, right? And I talk about respectful engagement because how do our leaders exercise authority here typically? In a very autocratic kind of fashion, right? And we see it in Parliament and the crosstalk in the Parliament, right? And who to meet who on the pavement and that kind of gun talk and so on. Whereas what we require is that we require our leaders to engage people and to do so in a respectful fashion. I think that if we do that, then you are then in a position to exercise authority and discipline within the workplace or wherever else, because people will respond to respectful authority. If my boss is respectful to me, if he values me as a person, if he values and recognizes my dignity as a human person, and he's consistent in his behavior towards me, irrespective of my ethnicity, whether I am Afro or Indo or China, whatever, and he does that, then I am going to respond. And there are multiple examples of that I think that we can find in our society.
Terrence, on a side, just an example. In pantomime, Derek Walker's play pantomime, there's this engagement between the waiter, Jackson the waiter, and True the Englishman. And they decide to switch roles, you know. And Jackson thought that was a stupid idea. And so he decided to switch roles, and Jackson didn't want to, so he said, "I'm ordering you." So Jackson said, "But that ain't sounding like no order." He said, "But it's an order." He said, "No, boss. It have to sound like an order." So you see, we have a history of how you're supposed to deal with me from both sides of the equation. And now, when you give me the order, my response going to be, and I cool your mouth and I stress, and that's the end of you and me. Now, that was how we had to deal with Picton and them fellas coming on the line for survival. But here we are now, independent, self-determinant, and we need to come to terms with that. We need to understand that, you know, being in charge don't mean I'm trying to disempower you and assert all my power over you.
Exactly.
I did a course many moons ago, and they used to say, claim your power. And for me, that was literally a curse. For a little red fella from Belmont just trying to find out who they were in the world, claim your power. I didn't see myself as having any power. And I come to realize now that, you know, it's where we all need to claim our power, because the elites seem incapable. We've had numerous examples. So this is why we make the opposite call now and say, listen, everybody had to check themselves. Everybody had to get to know their story. Everybody needs the opportunity to tell their story. Everybody seeking validation. Everybody, same status and respect the elite want, same status and respect Christmas and them want.
That's right.
Yes.
That's right.
So Wendell, I quite agree with you that this really comes down to the individual and to each of us. And Terrence, I quite agree with you that that we do need leadership, and we need those who are in authority and have positions of influence to, again, do the right thing. Now, this is going to take time, right? I mean, if you think about the kind of time it will take for us to have this re-education and this change in mindset and change in behavior that we need, this is not a 5-year, this is not a vision 2020, or, you know, this is a generation, I think. And that gets me a little bit discouraged. But then I think back, do you all remember when we had a litter problem in Trinidad and Tobago and we had a Chase Charlie Away campaign? Which
Bishop, yes.
Right, which as a child, I remember it being quite successful. And I remember at school, you know, we had various initiatives around this Chase Charlie Away campaign. Do you think, both of you, do you think that we can have a similar type intervention where we have a campaign around building, for example, building patriotism, building an awareness of self and of our national history and about who we are and where we should, and the way we should behave and respect and authority and all of these things that we discussed, to sort of accelerate this cultural and behavioral shift and transformation that we seek. An example would be Colombia and the sort of rebranding that Colombia had undergone coming out of you know, that very violent and you know, drug-driven chaos that they had some years ago. And now Colombia is one of the better performing economies in South America. In other words, do we have the room, and do you think that it would be successful and good idea to have a campaign around, not we don't like it so, but we fixing it? What are your thoughts on that? And then maybe we can go to some questions after.
I mean, as Wendell would say, you know, we have to walk the talk, and that's the problem. You know, because if you just simply launch another program, then people are going to look at it very skeptically, and then look at the behaviors of those in authority and say, but there's an inconsistency. The second thing I want to make to you is that when we I always tell my I do strategy consulting, I tell people that we must not try to boil the ocean. You can't boil the ocean. And therefore, you have to focus and tackle problems, prioritize and tackle problems one by one. If you start with the top of the society, our president, the prime minister, the chief justice, the speaker of the house, if you start with the commissioner of police, if you start with those people in those positions and they change their behaviors, it is going to begin to have a ripple effect throughout the rest of the society, and it can happen very, very quickly. But the problem is, look at what is happening now with our top offices in the land: president, the prime minister, and the chief justice.
Could it be any worse?
Oh my goodness.
So the point is that if it were the opposite, if you had these three leaders behaving in a particular kind of a way, speaking in a particular kind of a way, engaging each other in a particular kind of way, then the people around them are going to say, oh, that's the way in which we are supposed to behave. I am convinced that it needs to start at the top there. And you don't need to have a campaign of 1.3 million people. You just need to start key influencers in the society, and I think it can begin to spread. But I'd love to hear what Wendell thinks.
The challenge is to get to those key influencers, because, you know, so often, you know, the people in the positions to enable the best position to enable the change in the society are actually the ones that are the biggest impediments to the possibility of that change. And you know, we interface with agencies daily that show you what is going on here. You're supposed to be live in a sector and have the interest of my sector at heart, and it's inherently adversarial because you're underfunded, you're under-resourced, you're understaffed, and even in all that under, you don't even know what's going on. And you don't even, we could wage a campaign from now till. Charlie worked because she was able to create a character to tell a magical story, but those were more naive times. Trinidad Tobago is not that naive place that we would. You know, and it's I was reading something recently, in 1977, with one TV station, we had 50% local content, local coverage. Now, in 2016, the last time we measured, it was 12%. With all the new media and everything, it was 12%. Yeah. So, and all those people that are not online and whatnot, they still depend on that media to know what's going on. And you know what's going on? News. They don't know the stories. Nobody's telling the story of, you know, Adrian Cola Rienzi, the little reenactment. You know, we need to see and feel, we need to empathize. You see, the inability to empathize, particularly from on high. Chinua Achebe says, unless we really use our imagination and put ourselves in position of the weakest, we're not really in a position to assert any kind of authority. And
Precisely.
the whole idea of what is your role as a leader. And so often, I think, we fall prey to the trappings and the notions of leadership,
Yes.
and not the actual reality of leadership, and that it's about sacrifice, it's about
servant leadership,
service, example. You may not want to, but you have to. When you realize, somebody asked me to speak about being a role model. I say, well, you don't set out to be a role model.
Exactly.
You become a role model as a consequence of something you do. And one is forced to check oneself. Having written a song called Good Morning, I am forced to be more aware and mindful of saying good morning. And I lapse, and people tell me, they will shout it at me. They will remind me of this. And it's a simple thing, but, just putting it in practice every day, walking that talk, living up to, holding yourself to a higher expectation. We often use power to abdicate ourselves from responsibility, to shield ourselves from being accountable. And that can't be the case. And this is why I talk that people need to now start putting that pressure. We talk about the politics, we locked. And it's come straight down to ethnicity, and hopefully that will soon pass and we'll start getting down to something else. But in the meantime, what I advocate is strong civil society, people who understand what their interests are and come together based on that interest and are able to articulate the needs of that particular interest land or sector. And in doing so, we bolster the whole society and we fill the void and we become too government-centric in many ways,
That's right.
We're not holding the other pillars of the society to account. The consumer sector, sponsor a little football team in the area or something. You want to talk about fellas coming to rob you and whatnot. Put something back, reinvest. I remember going out to seek funding for a play many moons ago. We went to a big corporate sponsor, and their main criteria was it local or foreign. I was like, well, what's the difference? It's like, no, well, their brand doesn't afford them to associate with local. It's like, be in Trinidad. And people get away with this sort of stupidness all the time.
So, no, I quite agree that we need to hold those in the highest office to account, and that they should behave in a certain way. How do we get that to happen? But anyway, let's take some questions from our audience members, please.
I've gotten a lot of questions, and they come basically in 4 different categories. Public sector, private sector, individuals or the people, and then leadership and key influencers. So I'd like to start off with a question on public sector. Is constitutional reform what is going to make a change for the enforcement of accountability, performance throughout the public service, throughout the judiciary, police service, teaching service, etc.? Can you comment on that?
I think it's a brilliant question, because I think one of the things we are lacking severely throughout the public sector is basically performance management and accountability. But I'm not sure how to fix that. Terrence, you were going to say?
Yeah, no, I think that constitutional reform is absolutely necessary for us. We have a constitution, it's the 1976 constitution, which was in a lot of respects similar to our 1962 constitution. We have a president instead of a governor general, but there are some fundamental institutions that we have that are entrenched inside of the constitution, such as, for example, the service commissions, which in my view have now become dysfunctional. And these things need to be taken out of the constitution, and we need to operate the system in the way that other countries, New Zealand, Canada, and so on. These countries operate service commissions, and they're not on the constitution. And what we have done is that we have institutionalized low productivity within the public service. And the service commissions have got to the point where they are now so dysfunctional that we are now 6 years into a situation where we cannot appoint a commissioner of police. This is incredible. Yeah. And so constitutional reform, I think, absolutely is necessary. And one of the things that needs to happen in the constitution as well is that, in my view, and may sound a little bit radical, that the parliament needs to have its own budget, so that the parliamentarians can employ resources to support their work, and they can do intelligent work and make intelligent contributions in the parliament, instead of just the old talk that goes on. And similarly, the judiciary also needs to have its own budget and manage its own budget so that there's a degree of independence of the judiciary from the day-to-day vagaries of the budget. That may sound radical, but I think that that's important in terms of constitutional reform.
It sounds to me is one of the things that speaks to a failure of imagination. And, you know, yes, we have inherited certain things. And now as we grow, as we evolve, how do these things evolve with us? And you speak a lot to mistrust, and that's a big one of the big limitating factors in the whole scenario, in that people inherently are skeptical. And, you know, I encounter a lot of people, and all they do is talk badly of us. We specialize in bad talking ourselves, describing problems, never proffering solutions. And even if you dare to suggest a solution, we say, nah, that could never be. And these are the things I try to challenge, you know, on a literally everyday level. Why have we become so negative, self-negating? Why do we believe ourselves incapable of ever doing better for ourselves, by ourselves, without somebody else having to tell us, hey, you're shaming me? You know, somebody talk about putting on carnival for the tourists. We do not, with all due respect, we don't put on carnival for the tourists.
No, that's so funny.
You're starting from the wrong place.
Yes.
Right? And, you know, our first prime minister says, unless we become the subjects, not the objects, you know, we will always be in trouble. So I don't know what it takes to dare to believe in yourself, except doing that, believing in yourself, and encouraging others to believe in yourself, because we come from a place of who we feel he is. And
that's what
that does.
But do we have anybody who is actively pursuing or looking at pursuing constitutional reform? Because we would require a special majority in parliament, for example. We know that the opposition opposes everything for the sake of opposing. I mean, I don't want to sound negative, Wendell, but I just want to understand how we're going to get hit, how we're going to get there.
Yeah. But that's the monkey pants we're in it, Doc. I don't know. I mean, in terms of constitutional reform, it had to be somebody who's a you know, you were talking something you said the other day, and it struck me about, you know, celebrities. We need to have celebrities. We need to understand that. I was in a meeting with music teacher and the Economic Association. I said, you're afraid to invest in stars. You want to put the name of the institution first, and then, but we need to recognize that, hey, you see this fella, he good at what he does, and I trust him to lead the way. But then one man's hero is another man's villain because of sectarian interest and whatnot. I remember growing up, used to hear about bright fellas, you know, Lionel Dukharan and Carlton Phillips and Eric Williams, they're bright fellas, and there was a mythos around that. That no longer seems to be the case.
Yeah, we are crabs in a barrel, you see. But to your point, though, Marla, in terms of constitutional reform, yes, you need special majorities. But you see, I tell you something. You see, when water more than flour, you will get a special majority. As we got with the anti-gang bill, you're going to get the special majority. And when things, when maybe things have to fall apart, right, for us to realize that it is not your part of the boat that is leaking and my part is good. If your part of the boat is leaking, the whole boat is going to sink. And we're all in this boat together. And there is no south of the Caroni and north of the Caroni and so on. It's one country.
But, you know, speaking of one country, look at the ferry. I said to the other day, if you can run an inter-island ferry, you think you can run a country? You can't get a boat from point A to point B on the regular as a matter of course without having to think about it.
Yes.
And you're trying to run a whole country and we can't run that. And then you talk about that goes way back. So we're dealing with intractable problems from way back. And that's why my concern now is what they call the fierce urgency of now.
Yes.
Because while we're still grappling with these issues, now is going on. And now not stopping. So
the horse is starving.
We have to act now. And I think anybody who sees it and feels it needs to step in to the arena and help fill the breach. And they might call it this and they might call it that. And the next thing is to do what's happening here now. You know, it's the first time this little triangle is coming together, and hopefully not the last time, because for a long time, no economist ain't want to hear what no singer have to say, and no singer ain't really business with what the economist had to say, and the between shall meet.
Yeah.
But something happened to me the other day. I got a visitation from some of your agents from the agency that was meant to help diversify the economy, and I was nearly moved to tears because it's the first time in all my 30 years somebody was coming from one of these powerful agencies and saying, I recognize you, you see what you're doing, explain what your challenges are, and let's try and work on how we could take
that's
to
right.
the next place, right? Because that's all I'm trying to do. We employ 100 people for Carnival, from stage to backstage to all over the place, right? And then when we check the thing at the end of the day, boy, okay, well, at least we pay everybody. It's employment. How do we do that on the regular? How do we do that for real? How do we make a real industry? That's what I'm concerned with. Not no theorizing and no abstract thinking. We work in a yard. Our culture comes from a yard. So you come to me and you say all these things, and then you know what happened?
God, that's right. Nothing. Up in smoke. Yeah.
So, once again, hopes and dreams, failure to dream. Lovelace talks about selling our dreams and the consequences of selling our dreams. The notion that we don't need to invent nothing again, everything has been invented. All we need to do is import it and deploy it. And then, but the end result, he says, at the end of the day, in selling their dreams, the people were left empty, and it resulted in mass violence and crimes of passion. Is he a prophet?
No, but the thing is, Terrence, you touched on your book. I think one of the most powerful things and one of the things I'm most proud of in Trinidad, which of course there's another edge to that sword as well, is our happiness. And I've said before that we need to probably figure out how we could bottle this happiness and sell it. We are number 38 in the world today, or yesterday it was released, the World Happiness Index. Number 38 out of 100 and something countries. We just happy, and we happy all the time, and I think that's a good thing. That's probably why we are where we are, because we are a little too happy, and so we've let things deteriorate and devolve. But it's still something I think it's worth exploring as to how we can probably infect the rest of the world with this, and it's going to be our hallmark. But anyway, let's take another question, please, Melissa.
Let's talk about the private sector too. I've gotten several questions about what's the role of the private sector, particularly around increasing efficiency and productivity in Trinidad and making a change in that way.
The role of the private sector, I think part of it is to set an example. I mean, in the private sector, I suppose we have better performance management structures than we do in the public sector. But Terrence, tell me your thoughts.
Well, I mean, I think it goes back to the points about authority and discipline and so on, right? And how that is exercised. We grappled with this issue at the National Tripartite Advisory Council, and there's now a National Productivity Council that is supposed to be addressing some of these issues. But to my mind, there's a fundamental thing in terms of what happens in the workplace, and getting people aligned and working in a concerted kind of fashion towards a particular objective. We know that it happens at Carnival time, and we celebrate the fact that Carnival time we are so productive and so on, because people are aligned and they work in concert towards a common goal. And the important thing is that within the Carnival experience and within the steel band experience, for example, the authority structures are very much there. Right? The steel band talks block the pan, and everybody understands that this is what. So it is not about, it is about how you exercise authority and discipline in the workplace, getting people aligned. And I come back to my point about respectful engagement of people. People in our workplaces are disaffected, they feel disrespected. People in the communities, when the government doesn't fix the road, when we have water flowing in the road, when electricity goes, people come. What do they see on television? They do not respect me. That's what people feel. And so therefore, if people are feeling disrespected in the workplace, if they are feeling that they lack a power, they're not empowered in the workplace, how are you going to motivate them to be productive? And the answer is very, very difficult. So I come back to my points about respectful engagement and understanding the dignity of every human person, every worker in the workplace is important.
A culture of empathy is building that culture of empathy and working towards, as I said, a common purpose towards a common goal. That sense that we're all in this together. And I use the Carnival. I work with Minchell from the age of 19 to 30, you know, and really understand that the carnival is a highly invested time. We invest in it. We give of ourselves to it. And this is what we need to be able to do across the board. We need to believe that with this input, there's an outcome. And I think what happens is that people have become so skeptical and so cynical and so jaded because, you know, many times, like, I'm an employer now, and we have challenges motivating people to do the job they've been hired to do. You know, a lovely guy who would tell you, don't worry, I got you covered, I got you. He always was on the job. And 3 weeks later, he realized he ain't do nothing. And it's hard to, you know, get rid of him, but he not working. And then people come and tell you, boy, how you Venezuelan? And it's like,
get a Filipino.
Get somebody else. Because we've decided we can't work, we're incapable of work. And it's all these self-fulfilling things and that desire to break the wheel in so many different ways every single day. We're all complicit, we're all part of it. The contact culture, you know, people expect that because I have a little ring, I'm supposed to know everybody and get everything for them. And that's why I answer my phone plenty. I don't know, don't ask me to call this one or call that one and get vexed when I don't want to do it. You know?
Good for you.
I want tickets. I want tickets for this or tickets for that. What does that have to do with me?
I love it.
Contact.
Melissa, we have time for more questions.
Yeah, we've got a lot of people connected, so as long as the three panelists are willing to stay on, let's just go ahead. And I've gotten some questions around individual responsibility and getting the people to take their roles seriously. I don't know if the three of you want to take a chance to respond to this, but it's just saying that a lot of people don't realize the power is with them. And it's one thing to try and influence through music and books, which we've already discussed, but how do we also get these behaviors to become more permanent?
I just want to say that I think so much of this starts at home, in families and parents who need to parent properly. I think parenting is probably the hardest job on the planet, and they don't give you a manual, they don't send you to school, but it's probably the most important role as a parent that I think I play and will ever play in my whole life. But there's very little that prepares you for this. But I think that's probably one of the biggest downfalls we have in society, that we have parents who don't parent. And I think that sense of personal responsibility and accountability, if it's your role to feed the dogs and the birds and you don't do it, well, then you don't get to watch TV, you know, things like that. I mean, simple things like that, I think, stay with you over time into the age when you're in the workplace.
No, I agree, absolutely. We need, it's about the examples, and the examples come from the home, from your parents, the examples come from the school, from your teachers, and those exemplars investing you with a sense of your self-worth, with a sense of self-esteem, importantly, and then telling you that you are empowered to take responsibility for yourself, and then growing you and developing you so that you eventually come to take responsibility for others around you. And that's what it is. Yeah. And they're feeling in the home and in the school. Yeah.
And that's because, you know, so much of the dysfunction starts in the home. So much of the pain, so much of the horror starts in the home. So much
domestic violence
to do with what's happening. It's, you know, reconcile things and say, as a teacher, I've been teaching for 25 years, and I see children come to me at times, and I try to figure out, well, this one, a little different, a little special, have special needs. And then you get to talk to the parents and realize, yes, they do, and whatever the situation is. But many times, I actually had to deal with a parent that was afraid of her child, that the child would get violent with her. Brilliant child, but if she ain't feeling to work today, she ain't working. If she feeling to work, she on hyper speed. And, you know, we're in a pressure cooker. And how are we dealing with that? You know, the social services in this country, we haven't kept pace with the development of the country. When I was a boy and we experienced the first boom, I grew up in Belmont in an extended family. From there, we went to Victoria Gardens. That's a huge leap. And nuclear family, the whole society has made like huge leaps from being sort of community-based, certain values, where parents weren't trying to be your friend. My mother wasn't trying to be my friend. She had my best interests at heart. I know the parents of today because they're my age and younger. Them looking to lime and be partners, and it's a different engagement. And when the children of now start seeing, because it's all about example. You could talk how much you want. It's all about example. When they see what they see from early, how are you going to change that? And so often they call you out on it, and we're not listening. It's like what happened in America yesterday. All the children walk out the schools all over America. They say all the big people not getting it right. The simplest stop selling these guns. Just so. It's a simple thing, but big people will talk about it from now till. So we need to just understand that we're all under pressure. All of us feel aggrieved. In a sense, you know, it's an earlier question. I think we need something like truth and reconciliation.
Yeah, boy. Indeed.
We need, instead of all them commissions of inquiry, we need to have a big thing where a man could just come and tell his story and get things off the chest. And then we say, all right, we good, right? Let me go down the road and fix up.
Confession time.
Yeah.
Let's get the next question, Melissa.
Every time that Wendell says the word trust, about 5 people write me a question about that. So Wendell, the question is, how do you build trust?
How do
you build trust?
How do you build trust? Right, yeah, that's the challenge, isn't it? But you have to trust. You know, to build trust, you yourself have to trust. You yourself have to put yourself.
You have to be trustworthy too.
Yeah, and of course you have to be trustworthy. So I'll use myself as an example, right? I accept my role as a leader within the camp here. You know, I spend a lot of my day chatting, talking with people. As I say, I should put up a shingle saying I am in. And I consider myself the richer for that. You know, I have a partner, he goes in town, and when he comes back from town, he tells me what's going on in town. And he's a storyteller. And I encourage him to take his stories and tell other stories with it. Not just tell me, don't just tell me. Let me see how we could tell this story more and more. And I have to open to him, for him to open to me. And we all have to open to each other and trust. And, you know, the whole idea of being trustworthy in a society where, you know, it's so easy to be complicit. It's so easy to just fall in with what is. So, you know, Minshall again, in the mass camp, he used to say, that good is not good enough. And I was like, what? That good is not good enough. And you realize one of the syndromes we suffer from in this space is, that good, man. Why you take more in? Why? It's just for us. That good. I know so many times in trying to make a good piece of work better, and you go to the technical man and say, you know, I was thinking so. He said, nah, boy, you can't do that. I choose to remain ignorant of the technical things because I just want to rely on my imagination. And I want to be able to infect you with my imagination and see if you could challenge your imagination to do that. But invariably, the first response is, you can't do that. And I love when I get that response. Nah, man, you must be able to get that, man. Come on, man.
Good enough is good enough.
Yeah. So I could only speak from example, and example start with self. And we can't expect it of others if we're not prepared to expect it of self. We are quick to rush to judgment. We are quick to find fault. We're quick to point the finger, and I say let's start with self, and that circle around you, and the many cells start adding up to cells, and those cells begin to affect the body of the society, and before you know it, you know, there's healing in the place.
Well, let me just quickly say, I mean, on the concept of building trust, so I talk about that in the book a little bit, and there are 2 points I want to make, is that empirically, low trust societies perform worse than high trust societies. That's the data telling you that. The Scandinavian countries, for example, are high income, well-developed societies. They are high trust societies. Trinidad and Tobago is a low trust society. The second point I want to make is that part of our problem with trust has to do with our ethnic issues and ethnic competition and the stereotyping that goes with that. And we are very quick to call each other names. So this popular thing now about the 1%ers and so on, which is a pejorative term that is targeted towards members of the Syrian Lebanese community, who are Trinidadians, no less Trinidadians, no less patriotic, no less than any of us, right? And we are very quick to do that. And we tend to judge people immediately by the basis of the stereotypes. And this is one of the reasons why trust is so low in the society. How do you build trust? The only way to build trust, whether it is in a community, whether it is in a home, in a marriage, whether it is in a society, is by interaction with people. You cannot build trust if people are separate, if people are not engaging with each other, if people are not communicating and talking with each other, if people are not in conflict with each other, but learning how to manage that conflict in a way that is constructive. We have not managed conflict constructively here. Our conflicts get into violence, escalate into violence, into murder, which is what we are seeing now. That simple matters of I corn you and so on and so forth ends up today in this country in murder.
Yeah.
And it be that way.
But not just murder, Doc. Not just murder, quality of murder, horror, rage, you know.
Yes, absolute rage.
It just transmogrifies into like something horrible. And this is what we need to deal with. We can't run from that. We can't deny that. Yes, we are happy people.
Yeah.
But by the same token, we
are also an angry society as well.
Very angry. And you know, I talk about one of the words I would like to de-emphasize in the whole culture is fun, because fun in and of itself is just like froth, it's surface. You know, I would like to inculcate a culture of joy, and I healthily, respectfully suggest that, you know, there's a joy that comes in doing something, doing it well. There's a joy that comes in the hard work. And we need to de-emphasize, there's certain cliches of ourselves that we continue to perpetuate and reinforce. And I really, you know, I think they're doing us serious harm. And we're missing out. What is the premise of your book? We have all the goods. We have all the blessings. I always tell people, we're not like, with all due respect, we're not one of those islands in the Caribbean that have no culture and they all sound like half a Yankee. We actually have an incredibly rich culture. We've been gifted with so much from our ancestors, and like we can begin to understand that blessing, and we're not using it. You know, in the Bible, if you don't use your talents, you lose it.
Yes, right.
And you know, when Mike Naipaul spoke about the McMahon in 1960, how much, you know, we don't like Naipaul because he liked to say things we don't like to hear.
That's right.
But 2018, I'm dealing with a lot of empty shells, a lot of hollow vessels, a lot of people with all the bright brains and aspirations of elsewhere.
Naipaul is here with us.
This is the age of Black Panther and Wakanda. And when I don't like superhero movies, but all of a sudden, I had to go and see Black Panther. Because this is where culture, popular culture, becomes such a powerful force to help shape consciousness. And as I come back to what we're not using and being able to tell, Doc, you can write as many books as you want. Right? A few people like you and me and Marla go read it, right? I can sing certain songs, but we don't get play on the radio anymore because we're singing Ben Hoover songs and all those sorts of things. People don't want to hear that no more, right? But we have to claim the means to tell this, to use popular culture that we have, the culture that we have, to put it out there and tell the story, because we punch way above our weight. You know, we could spread. How come, you ever ask yourself, how come a few drunken Trinis in New York, London, Miami stroll out in the street, next thing you know, you have a festival with 2 million people, 3 million people. What it is about our culture, as opposed to any other culture in the world, Brazil have a carnival, but it's not Brazil carnival doing that. Why is our culture able to take root so easily elsewhere and millions of people respond? The world need it. They need that joy.
They need that joy, absolutely.
They need that culture of joy. So businessmen, start to invest in that, because one of the things that I also deal with now is that a lot of these young fellas that we're training up to be entrepreneurs, you're really setting them up, because without access to capital, right? And a lot of these fellas are now dealing in the dream industries. They want to make video games, they want to this, they want to that, they want to tell stories. We train them up as animators, and they're coming out and they're trying to organize. You think they could go by a bank and say, I want to be an animator? You think they could go by anybody and they say, I think you have a good idea there, I'm going to back that. And this is one of the other thing we need to deal with now, you know, is a culture of frustration. In 2012, the CARICOM Commission says that Caribbean, you dream of being the best that can be, but not here, elsewhere. We happy with that? I'm not happy with that. None of us can be happy with that. If you have children, I know as a young man growing up, people will ask me, what you doing here still? And that was like an indictment. How you mean? You're not good enough? And it was meant to be a compliment, a backhand compliment. You're good enough to be in the world. Well, we are in the world.
Yes.
And we operate from here. And you jump on a plane or you jump on Skype and you operate from here. Yes. Is my base. It's what gives me my being.
Yes.
So
it's like Lloyd West used to say, he used to say, I don't understand this thing about third world, Wherever I am is the first world.
That kind of current cultural arrogancy that we need. Because the English had it, What afforded them to conquer 3/4 of the world? It's just the idea of themselves,
Exactly.
It's the idea of themselves. So
wherever I sit is the head of the table.
Yeah. And Trinidad already have that propensity to have this big idea of themselves. So
that's right.
If we channel it in the right direction, it could be down to us exponentially.
Exactly.
Yeah.
We are coming to the end of the time for today, so I would like to ask you just to tell the audience, we still have a lot of people on the call, so just what would you like them to leave today with? If you could just give us those thoughts, and then we'll end the webinar.
I'll go last. You guys go first.
Well, I just jump right in and say that we are enough. We need to believe in self. We need to believe that our story is specific and unique, and we need to be the ones exploring it, asking the questions like Doc is asking. Do we like it so, or do we not like it so? Like I asked myself recently, what is power? Who has it? Who don't have it? We have to ask ourselves questions. And then we also need to look around with empathy and try to understand the space we live in and forge a new relationship to this space and to each other, because we're all brought here under varied circumstances. But I keep saying we all have to choose to be here with each other, embrace each other, and not be afraid of each other and buy into the old stories of each other. We need to challenge those stories in the now, because our children are doing it for us, whether we want to accept it or not. Listen to the children. They see what's going on.
I have nothing to add to what Wendell has just said. Fantastic.
I just want to say thank you. I mean, I can't thank both of you gentlemen enough for coming and sharing your knowledge, your wisdom, your experiences, your stories with us. I think I want to find a solution or solutions for Trinidad and Tobago. I would like to be part of the solution, and you two certainly are part of the solution. I think we have enough material, Dr. Farrell, for you to go off now and write, not we like it so, but we fixing it.
Title for my next book, Wendell gave it to me, The Joyous Society.
I love it. Thank you so much. And thanks to everybody who joined us on the call. I really appreciate it. I hope this has been as uplifting for you as it has been for me. And I look forward to hearing more from both of you. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.